see you here with us today. I hope that you benefit from hearing about the Georgia Milestones. Those of you who know me, I'll just go ahead and tell you, it does make me nervous to speak in front of really large crowds, so bear with me. Alright, I want to share with you first where my information comes from. There is a page on the Georgia DOE website, not the one you go to for your curriculum, not the georgiastandards.org, but the Georgia DOE web page that has an entire page dedicated to the Georgia Milestones. And so basically I went on there and pulled all their PowerPoints that they've shared with administrators and districts across the state, and I just kind of culled through them and pulled the information that I thought would be most beneficial to teachers in the classroom. I do ask that we hold questions for the end. Having done this a couple of times, I find that some people have questions up front that get answered a little bit later. So I've put out some blue sticky notes around the tables and in a couple of the chairs. Feel free to get up and help yourself. Jot down any questions you have. I will not promise you that I will have the answer, but I promise you that I will try to find the answer if I don't know it. Okay, so this is going to basically be an overview. We have 3 learning targets for today. Teachers, parents, bear with us. Learning target is something that you're supposed to walk out of here knowing and being able to do. So a learning target today is just to gather and hear information that will allow you to have a talking conversation about Georgia Milestones with your peers, with people in your community. To learn one thing about the test that you can take back to your classroom to improve student learning. And I ask that K-5. Please take something back with you today that you can put into your classroom that's going to make our children better prepared for the test this year, next year, the following year, whatever. Also, one resource that you can use in your classroom that will help you implement your second learning target, something you can use to improve learning in your class. Alright, one of the big changes with Georgia Milestones, CRCT was basically a testing system within itself, and it serviced 3rd through 8th grade. And then EOCs, or end of course tests, serviced the high school. And so by when they went to Georgia Milestones, they put them all under the same umbrella, which to me makes a lot more sense. Now you have a 3rd through 12th grade test that is similar from grade to grade. Now, we call the tests themselves, you might see this, EOGs, end of grade test for 3rd through 8th, and EOCs, end of course test for high school. It's called end of course, like a horse, at high school, because you can be a 9th grader or a 10th grader taking a different grade level assessment. And so it's matched to your class or your course, not necessarily your grade level. That's the difference in the EOG and the EOC. Another big change with Georgia Milestones that's going to affect us greatly in elementary school is that the reading, the language, and the writing are all combined into one single measure. Whereas in the past, CRCT had a reading test, and you got a reading score, and then you had a language test, and you got a language score, and then 3rd grade and 5th grade, you had a completely separate writing test, and you got your writing score from that. This time with Georgia Milestones, you'll get one score for ELA. That score will include your child's or your student's reading ability, their language, and their writing score, all kind of combined into one score. Also with the Georgia Milestones, and we've heard TEKS, which parents, that's the new Teacher's Evaluation System. The TEKS, the new evaluation system, requires teachers to have what's called a growth measure that has data to support it. So we have to have an assessment that shows that when the child entered this classroom, they were at this point. When they left the classroom, they were at this point, and the teacher's responsible for that amount of growth. So with that, Georgia Milestones was designed to produce that growth measurement. So 3rd through 8th grade, of course 3rd grade being your baseline year, 4th through 12th, excuse me, being able to get growth measures from that assessment because it's designed with that in mind, whereas CRCT and the other assessments were not. This first year, we are not using it for promotion retention. That has already been shared with us from the DOE. In the past, CRCT determined if a child did not pass, it helped determine whether or not they were retained in 3rd and 5th grade. That is not done with Georgia Milestones this current school year. That will be brought back into place for next school year. The test layout or the format actually changes quite significantly. And so hopefully we're doing things in the classroom a little bit differently in order to prepare the kids for this test. There are 3 different types of items that you will see on the test. In the past, we've seen like multiple choice or selected response, as it's often called, on the test, and that was all we had, multiple choice test. With the Georgia Milestones, you will have constructed response and extended response. Both of those item types will require students to actually produce some sort of a writing or a drawing or something like that in order to answer the test question. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Okay. Another part of this is that the writing component, whereas we talked just a second ago, like 3rd and 5th grade received writing tests, the writing component is now in every grade level. So every grade level will have a writing component in it. It's no longer just on the shoulders of 3rd and 5th grade teachers. Okay? Another part of the Georgia Milestones, a big change for us, is that it will have what's called norm referenced items in it. There's a difference between criterion reference and norm reference test items. Criterion reference is where we have Georgia standards, and here's a standard. This test question is matched directly to that standard. Norm reference is not done that way. A norm reference, you get a set of data for it in order to say that it belongs with this grade level. So 2 different types of test questions, criterion reference, matched to the standards that we teach in the classroom, and norm reference assigned to a grade level based off of the data. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Alright, that norm reference items, they are there for a very specific reason. Not to measure teachers' growth, not to determine promotion retention for students. The reason that those norm reference test items are there is so that we can now compare the state of Georgia to other states to see how we are doing with our educational system here as compared to everybody else in the United States. And we can only do that with the norm reference items because the state of Georgia, the CCGPS, actually is slightly different from other states' standards. So we have to have a test that will allow us to compare the state of Georgia to the state of Tennessee or Alabama or anyone else. And those norm reference test items allow us to do that. And as a county, we are required to test 30% of our students online this year. All right. Oh, I already got ahead of myself. Don't you make me nervous? All right. We talked about criterion reference and norm reference test items. We talked about the fact that criterion reference is matched to standards and norm reference allows us to be compared nationally. There will be 20 NRTs. I get the norm reference, the NR, I don't know where the T comes from, to be honest, but that's what they call them, NRT items. Norm reference test items. Then where's the I? But that's okay. I'm living with it. I'm going with it. There are going to be 20 NRTs those norm referenced items per subject area. So you'll have 20 of them in ELA, 20 of them in math, 20 in science, and 20 in social studies. Now, they can't keep it simple, so they take and they are able to align 10 of those to our Georgia standards, which then allows 10 of those 20 to fall into two areas, both criterion reference and norm reference. So those 10 will count in both areas. Okay? All right. Only the ones aligned to Georgia standards actually count for anything that's significant to us in this room. So I want to make sure we understand we do not need to be pulling norm referenced items and trying to teach them to our students. We are to teach the Georgia State standards. And from that is what our test scores that really count for us in here. That's what matters to us. So, has the big blue box. You see the blue boxes. Are y'all able to see the blue boxes? My computer on the way? We do that. The blue boxes are kind of like warnings or big important information. So all important uses of this test scores will come from the criterion reference ones, the ones matched to our standards. Thank goodness, right? Okay. Let's get a little bit more in depth about the different types of items there. Now, we're familiar with multiple choice test items. So I'm not going to spend any real time on that other than to let you know that the multiple choice test items will be in every subject area. What's new to us is the constructed response test items. They will only be in ELA and math. So if you teach science and social studies, go ahead and go. It's okay. Alright? These require the students to actually write something down. To draw a picture, to write sentences, that kind of stuff. The extended response, you can find them also in ELA and math. So science and social studies, go ahead. Yeah. Alright, these require more elaborate answers. They require the students to read a text and to write to a prompt. And I'm just going to give you my inference, and this is completely Christy Casey here. From everything I've read about the extended response, it reminds me a whole lot of the 5th grade writing test. It reminds me a whole lot of that. But that's just my inference. We won't actually know until we see the test this year. Okay? But these require more writing from the kids on that. So I'm thinking paragraphs on the extended response ones. Whereas on the constructed response ones, I'm thinking a couple of sentences or maybe draw a picture, something like that. And we'll look at a couple of item examples in just a minute. And then they're talking about technology-enhanced test items. We will not have any of those this year, but those are where I'm sure you've seen, like on the computer, where kids have to drag and drop things or move sentences, places, things like that, highlight or underline, anything like that. But we're looking for those to come out in 16-17, school year 16-17 is what they're saying at this point. So have a little bit of time there to prepare our kids for that. Here is an example of a selected response. It's a little bit blurry. Maybe it's me. Alright, I pulled this. Now, 3rd through 5th grade teachers, I will be sending you some links for you to actually view more test items because this is a little bit more pertinent to you. K2 parents, if y'all would like to see those just for your information, you can welcome to send me an email or write your email down on one of the blue pieces of paper. Make sure I get it. and I don't care to send it to you too. It's nothing that is top secret or anything like that. The items that we have as samples are released to the public and out there on the web. This here is one of the multiple choice responses. It is a little bit slightly different from some that we've seen in the past. The kids, of course, have the story that they have to read. Let's look, though, at part A. It says, which statement best expresses one of the themes of the story? In other words, this story over here can have more than one theme. Which one is best? And then part B, which is another multiple choice test question, says, which detail from the story, A, B, C, or D, best provides evidence for your first answer? So now your answer to the second multiple choice one is dependent upon your answer from the first multiple choice one. Now we've not really seen that kind of stuff before, so that's a little bit different. Here's an example of a constructed response one. Please notice here that there is both a part A and a part B to this test question. And the students have to answer both parts. And it requires a little bit of drawing, a division of the rectangle, and it requires them to draw a new visual model to prove that they are that their fraction is equivalent. So, not too bad. It requires a very in-depth understanding of fractions, though, more so than what we've necessarily seen in the past. Here's another constructed response, and this one's actually done on the computer. This year it will depend on what that 30% is and where that 30% is taking the test. So we don't know that yet. I think we'll hear in January.
Provide an example of a third grade level. The rectangle. The rectangle.
The ones before that.
This one?
No,
rectangle.
that one.
That one right there? It required me to think, where did I get that from before Thanksgiving break? I'm not going to promise, but I think that came from Kentucky, and yes, that is a third grade sample. If it came from Kentucky, I can double check that. When we finish, come up and we'll double check that. Okay? Here is another example of constructive response. Please notice that there are actually two stories up here that the child is required to read. Cricket and Cougar and Kira and Kira. So the student reads both passages, and then the student has to explain how the thoughts, words, and actions of the character help you understand what the character is like, and explain why the character chooses to save his or her family member. And then here is a place for them to write in sentences what their answer to that question is. Here is a technology-enhanced one. Here they have to drag the main ideas, the supporting details, into these boxes down here after reading the story. They have possible main ideas, possible supporting details. Of course, now we're not looking at doing these kinds this year. It was 16, 17. But I want you to go ahead and see kind of what it would be like. All right. Get just a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of the test. What does the test actually look like? Which is probably a lot of what we're here for today. There are 3 sections to the ELA test, 3 parts to it. One of which is mainly a writing test. Okay? Math, science, and social studies each have 2 sections. So ELA has a little extra in there, a little bit more demanding. Now, Remember, all of my information came from the Georgia DOE, Department of Education website. It says that there will be 40 selected response multiple choice test items. Those 40 will count 1 point each. They will also be what's called evidence-based selected response. Remember that first test question we looked at where the second question down there required them to support what thing they chose for the first one? That's evidence-based. I have to pick evidence from the story to support my choice from the first one. So evidence-based selected response. Now the teachers and I have been talking about the importance of the children supporting their ideas using the text. So that's not really brand new to us. Okay, there will be 2 constructed response and they will count 2 points each. There is 1 constructed response that counts more, it's 4 points. 1 extended response and it's 7 points. So, my math people can add this up real quick. We're still heavier point-wise with our multiple choice test at this point. Okay? So, that made me breathe a little bit easier. Okay? Now, there will be 20 norm reference items. Remember we talked about those? Those are the ones that allow us to be compared nationally. Those 10 of them also fall up here in the criterion reference. 10 of them count twice. Okay? And then there are 6 embedded field items for a total of 60 items for the ELA test. All right. Blue boxes, remember important information. So, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade writing teachers and reading teachers. Important information here. Writing prompts will be informative or opinion. In the past, we've also had narrative. But I promise you I cut and pasted 3rd boxes are blue also. So, informative or opinion. Also, I cut and pasted. They say warning too. Warning. Students who simply rewrite parts of the story without explaining their ideas or why that part of the text supports their idea will not receive favorable scores. So I can't just say, in the story it said blah, blah, blah. I have to explain why that supports my answer, using my own words. Math. Those of you who know me know I like math a little bit better. So, math. It has 50 selected response test items, 1 point each, 2 constructed response at 2 points each, and 1 constructed response that's weighted a little bit heavier at 4 points. Math does not or is not slated at this time to have an extended response. I do feel like we will probably see it so in the future, but that's just what I feel like we will have. That is not anything someone else has told me. There are 20 norm reference items. Remember 10 of those counting up there in the criterion reference, also serving dual purposes. And 10 embedded field items for math, for a total of 73 items. Science and social studies, you have it a little bit easier, get to breathe a little bit deeper. 55 selected response at 1 point each. There are no constructed response or extended response in social studies or science at this time. 20 norm reference items, 10 of them count up there in that criterion reference also. 10 test items so that they can get the data to see if they're good solid test questions for a total of 75 items. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that science and social studies are exactly the same with that information. 55 multiple choice at 1 point each, those norm reference items and the field test items for a total of 75 items.
Chrissy, is it still true that field test items have to count against them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. items are simply to gather information about the test item itself. If you've ever served on the committee that gets to look at that data, it's pretty intense. Sometimes they bring the data back and the test question is automatically thrown out just because its data is so poor. But the test question itself does not count against the students. It really is just there to see, is this a good test item, or is there some big flaw with the test item? Because if it doesn't test well, then they don't keep it. Yeah, it's about the validity, yes. Okay? All right. There will be rubrics, because any time that you have written work with students like this on an assessment, there has to be a rubric in order to get that score. So there's going to be two different types of rubrics used to score this assessment. One of them is item, or one set of rubrics is item specific. So those constructed response rubrics are item specific rubrics. The DOE will not be releasing those specific rubrics to us. Although we'll look here in just a minute. I scoured around and followed a couple of links on that web page and found an example of a constructed response rubric that I will share with you guys. Okay? They will also outline the expectations for the answers to the scores. We expect to see these things. That just helps with that validity, that, the stability within the scoring process. And they will provide those scores with justifications and explanations. The answer should look similar to this. If it looks like this, it should receive this score, and this is why it should receive that score. So we'll look at a couple of those in just a minute that the teachers can use in their classroom to help them out. And also there will be another set of rubrics, or rubric, called the extended response rubric. They will be releasing that one. Have not released it, or they had not released it as of last night when I was just making sure to double check some of the things that were out there. They have not released that one at this time. So I'll keep looking for it. If you find it before I do, send it to me. Okay? Also, this writing, the extended response writing, will be in response to a text. They'll read a story, and then they'll have a prompt for which to write a paper on. And then it's scored basically on two big features, and this is what really reminds me of that 5th grade writing test. So you've probably seen something similar to this in the past. Idea development, organization, and coherence, which reminds me a whole lot of style. And then language use and conventions, which we've been scored on in the past. Okay. So two different rubrics will be used with the scoring of this test. Aha, here it is. Here's the constructed response rubric that I found in a different PowerPoint, following a couple of links off of that page. And it looks very familiar. It has a 1 to 4 score, which tells me that it's probably one of those ones that's worth 4 points. And it just says minimally demonstrated, basically demonstrated clearly and thoroughly. And then it gives a little bit more explanation as to what that is. I do have a couple of copies left of this from a couple of different presentations, and I'm sure we can get extra copies if we need to. But if you would love to have a copy of this, maybe to read tonight as you're trying to fall asleep, you can pick up a copy of this from me after we finish. So, all right. Lots of questions about testing online. I'm going to be honest, I will not have a lot of answers for you on that. I will be giving you the information I do have. We are required as a county to test 30% online this school year. In year 3, 80%. And by year 5 years from now, 100% we're supposed to be all online at that point. Some things that we as teachers and administrators just need to kind of start thinking about as we move towards more online testing. We might have to have more than one testing session per day. If we're running kids through a lab setting, we may have one teacher that takes the math test in the AM, and then another comes in right behind her and takes the math test in the PM. Just a thought. A content area can span multiple days now, and that's brand new from what it has been done in the past. I think that we will want to avoid that as much as possible, but
It may have to.
yeah, might have to.
Especially with bad kids. If it can't work that fast or whatever.
They mentioned cycling students through a lab. Also, to think about seating space, that kind of consideration, because if I'm sitting right here at my computer and you're right there at your computer, it's real easy for me to see what you're doing and real easy for you to see what I'm doing. We want to be cognizant of that. Another concern is the logins and the passwords, and teaching kids how to log themselves in, especially if the passwords are very unfamiliar to them. And then, of course, what happens when the internet goes down? We need to have plan B, C, E, F, J, K, L, right, in place also, just in case.
Christy, if I'm not mistaken, when we did the pilot test, which is what this was for, when we did the pilot test, we had a situation where the internet went out on one of the computers.
Yeah.
And when we went back in, it had automatically saved part, now not all, but part of what this child had done, and they were able to log right back in. So they may have something in place for that, because I know our network, it goes in and out, in and out, in and out, but there was a situation where that kind of happened, so they may have something already planned for that.
Oh, good.
As far as a backup would say, but
Yeah.
that is an issue.
Good, good. That's good to know. Speaking of the public test, so it's...
Question. Is that okay?
Yep.
If it spans over multiple days, how do we concrete the validity of the test?
I'm not positive, but I'm going to share with you my thoughts because I've done a lot of thinking about this. I would think that we would have to have a plan in place where we did like part 1 of math and finish part 1 today and then do part 2 tomorrow.
Yeah, you would have to, it would have to be a part, whatever part was started, a part would have to be finished. But it doesn't necessarily mean the whole subject area, because we've done that before with CRCT. We've had to split that up before, and it's not even affected the validity of it. I mean, especially with our young kids. I mean, they just don't think about going, oh, I'm going to go look up all these answers. I mean, that doesn't occur to them. But we have done that before in the past, and it has not been an issue. But once they start a part, they have to finish it, or if they don't finish it, that's it. They don't get to go back and finish that part.
And we've seen that before too.
Yeah.
You know, student gets to number 10 on the test, gets sick, has to go home. The rest of that part of their test is wrong. Maybe they come back the next day or a couple of days later.
And they can do part 2, but they can't finish part 1.
Is that going to be the same here?
It probably will be.
Probably.
I can almost guarantee it.
Yeah.
And I have to say though, I had a kid that did that. He like got to number 5, and then he started throwing up, and it was on reading, and it really killed me because he was a kaleidoscope child, and I mean super smart. And I'm thinking, oh, that's it. He's going to take reading over. Do you know he passed? He didn't exceed, but he passed. And he didn't have to take the test over. He did part 2, and he did 10 questions on part 1, and he passed CRCT reading.
That's unusual.
Yeah, he made like an 820. I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Because I had already told his mother, oh, he's going to have to take it over because he's going to bomb it. Well, he didn't bomb it.
No, but see, if that happened now, it doesn't matter if you pass or fail. It matters if you make gains. So if the next year, I mean, it would,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that it may not necessarily mean they're going to totally bomb it out.
Alright, so Naomi did participate in the pilot test last school year, and I want to share with you some of the issues that the scores recognized with with the pilot test, just so that we could go ahead and start preparing our kids for this kind of stuff. A lot of the kids did not show their work, so they were asked to say, divide the rectangle into pieces for a fraction, and they didn't actually do that, but maybe they did the written part. They didn't show their work. Also, they didn't detail their thoughts. So they were asked to explain how they knew their answer was right, and they would say things like, well, I just knew that it was right, without going through and explaining how they got to their information. Also, when they were asked to cite evidence or support an answer to make a claim, they didn't do that. They would go back into the text and pull out and say, the story said this, and it supports my answer because it does this. Also, remember we've seen test questions already that have part A and part B, and they would only answer one part of it. So go ahead and start preparing your students to not do these things, I guess you would say, to help combat that already in class and in our classroom tests. All right, I'm asked all the time, especially with CRCT, you know, who decides when this test is taken and why did they pick that week? The DOE actually sets a window, and the window this year is March 30th through May the 1st. Then Walker County has to choose a 9-day window within the DOE's window. I'm not sure why we only get 9 days with this.
There's a reason. I can't remember.
Okay.
Chris tells us, but I don't remember.
Yeah. Write it down next time because that really bothers me. While we had 10 days of CRCT, only 9 with Georgia Milestones. The only thing I can figure is that we don't have reading and ELA.
Probably.
We have it together now. So maybe they're thinking our test is shorter.
There's no
Yeah.
With the writing.
Not with the writing. Take them all day just to do one thing.
All right. A couple of other things to think about. If a student starts taking the test online, they must finish the test online. If they start taking the test paper pencil, they must finish the test paper pencil. Also, there is an order that the DOE sets that we must take the test in. I've always complained, you know, we should take math first, right? Day one?
Yes.
Yes.
Reading first.
Got some support? Okay. The state actually sets the order. They say it has to be ELA first and math second, then science, and then social studies. So they get to make that decision. If a section is started, like you start the ELA test this week, it has to be finished this week, except for Section 3. It can actually be spanned over 2 weeks. So Section 3 of the ELA test, remember it was the one that was different, mainly writing. It can be done separately. All right, a lot of you are interested in this. How much time will my kids have? Okay, so sections 1 and 2 of the language arts. You have 60 minutes minimum. The kid must sit there with a test in front of them 60 minutes. You can get them up to 70. The third section of English language arts, 70 minimum. They can have up to 90, giving it in 10-minute increments. So I give you 70, you're still not finished. Got 10 more minutes. You have 80 now, still not finished. Last 10 minutes. Now you're at 90. That's the max time that I can give you. Math. There's 2 sections in math, remember? 60 minutes minimum, 80 maximum. And then science and social studies, 50 minimum, 70 maximum, increased in 10-minute increments. Okay? All right. It's important to note, and it's hard to see that blue box down there, but if kids have an IEP that allows them to have extended time, these maximums do not count for them. If they have time and a half, you take the 70, divide it in half, that's where your half comes from, add it back into the 70, there's your time and a half. Okay? So have to follow the letter of the law with those IEPs. Okay, a couple of resources that are already available to us. I believe that I sent out the content links. Okay, get some yeses? Okay, good. Alright. We also have test blueprints. It shows you which standards are like available for putting on this test. And it has about 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. Have I sent those out? Somebody write me a note so I don't forget. Oh, no. Now send out the test blueprints. There's accommodation guidelines for IEPs and special ed students. I believe our SPED teachers have had multiple meetings about those accommodations already. Also, they have released some items on what's called Learn OAS. This is a website that has some online testing items released by Georgia. But there was a little blurb put in there that said, be careful, these test items are not necessarily to the depth and rigor that you will see on the Georgia Milestones. So just be aware of that. I'm going to send these places for release test items. I want to share with you where I got these places though, because it's not just I pull from anywhere. Either these resources were given to me by mentioned in a webinar or in the DOE's PowerPoints or something like that, or they were mentioned to me through GCTM, the Georgia Council of Teachers for Mathematics, by somebody that I felt was a good solid math instructor and knew what they were talking about, or they were given to me by our RESA district, which is responsible for our professional learning, as good places to go to get test items to see what they will look like for Georgia Milestones. All right. However, last night, they released 3rd and 5th grade assessment guides. And within those assessment guides, they do have some test questions. So whoever's making my note, if you want me to go ahead and send 3rd and 5th grade assessment guides, I will, as long as our email doesn't get too big. They have not released 4th grade yet. So we'll just keep checking back. They're supposed to be coming out with some study guides for the kids. And there's one informational video that has been uploaded to their site, but the way I read that was like I was expecting multiple videos, you know. They only have the one, so I'm thinking maybe they might be coming out with some more, but I don't know. It was okay. All right. Check yourself. Do you have a general feel for what this test will be like and the expectations? Pardon me? Oh,
You don't want to know.
I'll see you after class. It is very overwhelming. That we're just looking for a general feel at this point. Do you have one thing that you can take back and put into place in your classroom that will help students be better prepared when they get ready to take this test? Maybe you're going to include more writing. Maybe you're going to have them citing evidence from text, having them read a story and then write a response to it, something like that. And I'm going to email you all those links so everybody will have a resource that they can take back. No excuses on the 3rd one. Okay. We took several questions throughout. Was there questions that I didn't get to?
Yeah, I wrote mine down.
Okay.
I was going to wait until the end.
Oh.
Like, you know, No, the rubric that's going to be used that was ranked 4, 3, 2, 1.
That I showed, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is considered a passing score?
I do not know that.
We're going to go with probably not 1, perhaps 2, but definitely 3 and 4 perhaps.
Remember where it said, those of you who get motion sick might want to close your eyes just a second. Okay, right here, where it says, here's a constructor response, and it's worth 4 points, I think that that's where that rubric will be used. And the student will get, you know,
So
that
those
many
will just be
points.
a portion of their points. So if they get a 1 on that response, that may not make or break them in comparison with everything else.
Exactly.
It'll just be factored
That help?
in. Who is scoring?
I do not know that. They have not said anywhere on their website as to who is scoring. I will say from my experience working with the CRCT that they will probably be brought in and heavily trained at the beginning of this next summer. And that is why we will not have our test scores back in order to use them for promotion retention this year. But that's just my assumptions, and you know what they say about assuming things.
So when it is used for promotion retention, when they retake the test, will they retake the test in its entirety? Like I know now when they do retakes, they take an abbreviated portion of the test. So you don't know if they're going to retake all of it or
I do not know. They did not say that anywhere. They didn't address retakes.
Oh, well, apparently everybody is just going to pass it and just,
Yes,
awesome.
that's what we're going to believe.
Go Georgia.
Okay, the selected response questions, do you know if it's going to be traditional A, B, C, or D, or could it be like, I've seen things that are like A through G, which one of which ones of these
Which
could be
ones?
correct?
There's more than one answer.
When I was at GCTM, there was a guy there who actually helped design some of the park assessment. And let's face it, the DOE has said multiple times that ours will be a park-like assessment. And he talked about there being more than the ABCD. He also talked about and gave us some examples. And if you'll write me a note, I'll bring my iPad where I took snapshots of his examples of where there's more than one correct answer within the ABCDE.
I don't see how that's possible when they're only weighted 1 point per question. You know what I mean? Usually you get partial credit for those types of questions. You're going to get partial credit of a 1 point. I mean, you know, a 9, 10s, 18.
It'll probably be right or wrong if they don't get them all.
That's what I'm saying. Like, usually it's weighted more because you get partial credit. You get A, G, and B, or whatever.
Because on the item we saw, it said which situation, like it, you know.
It was like a
5
bar
plus
graph.
equals-
And it had like 7 statements about the bar graph. Some of them were correct, some of them weren't.
So which one?
Honestly, guys, we can
Are
speculate all day long about what it will possibly be like, but I would say that until we actually see the test, we will not know for sure.
You'll find out in April.
So, yeah.
Who's the publisher of this?
CTV, McGraw Hill. Yeah. Is it?
When you say the evidence-based, and I may have missed this, but the evidence-based response, will it be similar, like if it's A, B, C, D, where it could be the same answer but the wrong evidence to support it?
Like this one right here, yes.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to be honest, and you can see which answer I chose. I didn't even read the story. I was just looking at sample items. But the kid has to read the story, and then he has to answer which one best expresses one of the themes, and then here's the evidence that they have to choose in order to support that one. And I would say that we'll see some like that as evidence-based.
If you miss the top part, you're more than likely to miss the
Miss the
second
second
part. So,
The math part, they get scratch paper, right?
Yes, and I thought maybe we were going to be able to have graphing paper, but no, it has to be, the plain or notebook paper. But they did say this time that it can be notebook paper, which at least gives us a little bit of a leg up because we can teach them to organize their, their place value columns using
The math question, if they do have to take it on the computer, how do you show your work?
Like divide the triangle.
I mean, like
A rectangle.
the question that you had there that says copy the rectangle.
Now, this one, it came from Kentucky and it was a paper pencil.
But I will tell you, in Khan Academy, which is all online, they have what's called Scratchpad, and they use the thing and they draw it.
Like in Tunksville.
So it's all, it's, yeah, it's, they.
Lord,
they
go.
in and-
I gotta prepare my kids for that.
Go here, right here.
Be ugly.
That's the question.
Right here, Laura, right here, at learnoas.ctb.com/Georgia. Okay? That's going to show you examples of it.
If they're taking it online, did you say prior to this meeting that there would be a drop-down calculator for all students that are taking it online, or just?
No calculator unless it's in their IEP.
Oh, I thought on the computer program there was a drop-down calculator.
That would be for the older grades. None of ours can have a calculator unless it's in their IEP.
And
But I mean, it's gonna be put in my hand calculator, it's not gonna be a drop-down calculator, that'd be something.
And I do know that they came out with the accommodation just recently, right before Thanksgiving break, to say that it can be in-hand calculator. It did not have to be on.
Also, at one of our prior meetings, you know, you had mentioned that there would be a drop-down calculator for everybody's use.
Well,
Or
that was in the
possibly.
tools.
Uh-huh.
That was on one of the resources. But then it came back out and said that, and then there was some confusion as to, okay, calculators for everybody, calculators for only high school. And at that point, it was kind of like it was for everybody. But
So if you're taking it online, computer part, and it doesn't automatically, when the 90 minutes, the absolute last deadline, does it click, cut off? You don't know?
Don't know, we'll just have to wait and
That's
see.
gonna be difficult, like you've got multiple people testing, and they've had frequent breaks maybe, and they're, you know what I'm saying?
Renee, there was a way to pause the test for those that had accommodations when we piloted. So it may be the same way for those sped kids or 504 kids that have to, you know, have that break or whatever. They'll have something built in for them. But those kids are not ones that we, you know, even have to do online this year. They may give us a break on that.
If they're read to, they have to do it on the computer. That's
Yeah.
what we're doing. I mean, you know, just keeping up with various people's times. That's
Yeah.
what I'm wondering.
and what she started
Be
online,
nice
you
if
have to finish it online. So if you
Yeah.
have read two or reading, then it has to be online.
You may read to the questions.
Yeah, I don't really do
That's my
So
understanding.
everybody who reads the questions and answers.
That's my understanding.
That was my understanding.
So that'll be this whole lab, taking up multiple days. Or somewhere. Some technology taking up multiple days.
Alright. Okay, if you have other questions, I'll hang around for a little bit to see, but at this point, Ms. Hibbs?